Hey guys, this is going to be kind of a long chat. I want to talk about selling your coffee after you've roasted it, particularly through farmers markets. Let's get into it. Alright, this video I think is going to be long, informative. If you're roasting coffee at home, and you have the production capabilities of making 5, 10, 15 pounds of coffee in a week's time, you might be interested in selling coffee at farmers markets. It's really awesome to be able to share what we make as specialty coffee roasters with our community. So with that, I'm going to break this entire thing down into chapters of some kind, and I'll probably put up here, maybe like right here or so, some kind of visual guide to show you what I'm talking about, where we're at, and you can kind of scrub through and see where we are currently in this conversation. And to start, I really want to talk about before you're at a farmer's market. The months, perhaps a year of planning you should probably be doing, thinking about all of the things that you need to take care of before you're physically driving out to your farmer's market and setting up your booth, okay? If you've never been to a farmer's market, you really ought to go and experience one to get the vibe, to understand the traffic, to perhaps ask some questions. And that's kind of where we'll start in this preparation chapter. You're gonna wanna make some contacts, network a little bit. There should be someone in a position facing the public who will accept applications to become a vendor for your local farmers market. Farmers markets are pretty popular in the United States. Almost every city that I know, that I've lived in and that I've traveled to, they have them. It's just a matter of finding the right people to talk to. And so with that, make contacts and make them quickly. There's plenty of opportunity to do all kinds of other planning, but you need to establish those contacts right away with the people who can help you become a vendor. Make those contacts and find out whether your farmer's market is in need of coffee, because you may have other vendors providing coffee, and it's possible that they may not allow any more coffee providing vendors at your local farmers markets. Where that's the case, you may need to branch out to surrounding counties, towns, and find out if those farmers markets that aren't necessarily nearest to you, they may be in need of coffee vendors. So make those contacts, find out who your farmers market managers are. They usually work for your city or your recreation departments, and they have this role, or at least it's a responsibility within their role, to manage their farmers markets. Those would be your contacts. Usually there would be an online form you could find or print out, fill out, mail to your market managers, and become a vendor. In preparation here, making those contacts is extremely important. So get them all in a row, have conversations with each one of them to understand the need for your product. And understanding your product is a huge part of this as well. When I went to my market manager, it was pretty critical that I already had established 4 or 5 different coffees that I wanted to have on regular rotation. And what that means is I'm buying that coffee as a constant so that my customers would eventually understand that these are the coffees they know they can come back for every single week. Now, a little bit later on, I developed the idea of buying a lower quantity of other coffees to have as limited edition items that sit a little bit separate from where I normally put my coffee on my booth. And so having this identity already established, at least with those constant coffees, gives you a little bit of a heads up when you go to talk to those managers and tell them what you have to provide. Let's say that there is another coffee vendor, but they only serve 1 or 2 different types of coffees, whether that's whole bean, ground, specialty or not. It's important for you to have this product line established, at least in some form, to go to these market managers and say, this is what I have here, 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 and here. And if you even do a little bit of effort, go to a farmer's market, and if there is a coffee vendor, you can check them out and see what their offerings are. Maybe they're primarily second wave or third wave. Maybe they're offering only Ethiopian coffees because that's what they really like. Maybe they're only offering Colombian and Guatemalan coffees. What you can do is say, okay, well, there's lots of that and they have a lot of customers that come for that. Maybe I should provide something different. So get an understanding of what you want to achieve, what products you want to put out there, and what other products are already available, because those other vendors may have been there for a long time before you with a well-established clientele, and you need to break into that market that they're already serving and offer something unique, something better, something different. So going to those market managers and saying, this is what you already have, I know what you have, here's what I'm doing different. Make you and your product and your brand desirable. If you can do that, you have a better chance of being accepted as a vendor. So we've talked about networking. Make connections with current vendors. Make connections with market managers. Preparing for a farmer's market. You need a brand. You need to understand a few different things. Labels on your product, especially if you are working within certain limitations set, such as those here in Michigan that dictate how I'm able to operate. I work under Michigan's cottage food law. The cottage food law here in Michigan has certain restrictions, such as a revenue cap yearly, the fact that I cannot mail my product anywhere, and I cannot do wholesale business with businesses. So what that basically means is I have to sell my product face to face, make that exchange in person, and I cannot mail it, and I can only make so much money doing it. And then I have to step up into the commercial world. And that's a whole nother topic that I've not yet had to experience, and I'm not ready to have a conversation about because I'm not there yet. But I have been working within cottage law for the past year, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Cottage law has other certain kind of stipulations, such as here in Michigan, I have to print out on my labels exactly this wording that says my product was made in a home kitchen, not inspected by the FDA, certain things like that. Your state may absolutely vary on what wording or if you even need that. Check with your local health department and they can tell you. There's a website for Michigan where you can go on and see all of the different requirements, and I believe there was even a little section for coffee. So you may have that available to you. So there's certain things you need to have on your label. But there's other things you should have on your label, especially if you're serving specialty coffee that other people are going to appreciate. Not just your local health department, but the people buying your coffee. For me, I wanted simple, and I wanted something easy to understand. The information that's on the bag is relevant to the coffee and pretty much nothing else. What I have on this bag here is country of origin. There's some obvious things. Just think about when you go to buy coffee for you that you haven't roasted. You are going into, let's say, a cafe, or you show up to your local roaster and they've got stuff in their bags. What are you looking for? You're looking for country of origin. You're looking perhaps for altitude. You're looking for taste notes. You're looking for little pieces of information that can guide you towards what to expect out of that coffee. And then there are other bits of information that can be helpful identifiers for the future for a person who might want to try, let's say, Blue Mountain coffee again, because Blue Mountain coffee is smooth, for example. They may be interested in trying other Blue Mountain variety coffees, and maybe not just from Haiti, maybe Jamaican. So little pieces of information like that that serve your particular market. And people who buy specialty coffee tend to really appreciate that information. So you need the cottage law information, and you should have as much information as you can provide that you feel is relevant to your customer base. For me, it's country of origin. I have a little indicator for light, medium, and dark roast, and I check the box. And then I have typed out for these coffees that I buy constantly what the region is within the country of origin. For this one, it's the Savan Zombie region of Haiti. The altitude, 1,400 meters above sea level. The varietals, Arabica, Blue Mountain, Typica, and Bourbon. as well as taste notes, smooth, floral, bright, and low acidity. And then you can expand on that in conversation, in person, at your farmers markets, and this is often the case. This is almost 100% the case. People read the bag, and then they wanna know more. And they have questions. They may tell you how they typically like their coffee, and do you think this would be something I'd like if I like my coffee this way? Your bags aren't the one-stop shop for everything when it comes to information. You have to be part of that process. And we'll talk about being a salesperson a little later on too, but again, we're preparing for a farmer's market here. The preparing phase includes needing to design your labels. I designed these labels myself. I used help from a couple of friends who are knowledgeable, and I valued their opinions, and I went through phase after phase after phase of revising this kind of brand identity here, what you see on this bag. I designed everything that you see below the logo that says David Sargent Coffee, roasted whole bean inside of here. A friend of mine designed for me, and I appreciate that a lot. And I moved forward using that asset. I chose the craft look and feel. I chose the size of the label. You can have a much smaller label. And then I have roast date on here. That's important for any person who is seeking out specialty coffee. There, as a customer, they want to be able to see when it was roasted. And then you want to have the actual weight of the contents of the bag on there as well. I think that's also stipulated by cottage law here in Michigan. So develop a brand, essentially. Come up with a name, come up with a look, a consistent feel, and establish it. That said, I have a background in graphic design, and I have the software for graphic design available to me, so I was able to do that all myself. You may not. You may need to hire out for that, but it is important so that people who are walking by have a reason to stop and look. Preparing for a farmer's market is not easy. You've got to make cost profit analysis projections, you've got to make initial investments, and you've got to set prices, and you've got to understand, okay, if I spend this much on a roaster and I spend this much on equipment, what do I need to price my coffee at for it to A, make sense, and B, make a return on investment anytime soon? So as part of preparing for a farmer's market, sitting down, writing out all these possibilities is kind of important. You really should understand whether or not this is going to be worth it for your time. I can tell you right now, before we get into the financial part of this, that I'm actually in the red this year. And it's because I made two relatively large investments that I have not profited over yet. There's cost of goods and doing business, and then there are non-recurring costs, such as the purchase of my bullet roaster over here. And in fact, the beginning of the year, back in January or February, I purchased my Gene Cafe roaster, which didn't even make it past June, because by June I had the bullet roaster, because I realized once I started roasting with the Gene Cafe, I was going to need something a little more serious to allow my production to happen faster, so I could produce more coffee in a shorter amount of time, because it was taking me 30 or 40 hours on the Gene Cafe, totally not worth the time at that point. Now, if you only want to sell 5 or 10 bags of coffee, you can get away with a Gene Cafe. You can, but you're gonna quickly realize, if you're the only one in town selling specialty coffee, if you have any kind of traffic at all, you're gonna sell more than 5 or 10 bags of coffee some weeks. You're gonna sell 20, 30, some weeks I sold 40, 45 bags on a single day, and that's awesome. But you've gotta be prepared for it. You've gotta understand what that kind of commitment means. So preparing for a farmer's market, we're past the bags, we're past the networking. You gotta understand your brand, understanding your production limits. Some of these people you may find come back to you and they'll buy, and that's amazing, you want that. But you're going to continue to have new people all the time too. And so you have to understand, if I have, let's say, a sale report on a certain day that ends up with me selling 30 bags of coffee, I need to be able to produce 30 more bags by the next week, and probably a few more on top of that to make sure that I don't run out in case I have even more customers, right? And there are other factors here. We have a heavy influence of tourism here. So you got to understand kind of the shifts in demand with your traffic changes too. So production limits here. If you're roasting on a Gene Cafe and you're trying to get 30 or 40 bags of coffee, if you're doing half-pound bags like me, maybe you're doing 12-ounce bags, you've got to understand exactly what you can do with the equipment you have. The Gene Cafe, I think, is $700 or $800. That's not cheap. But there's a reason why 2 kilogram, 5 kilogram, 10 kilogram machines costs what they cost. This aillio bullet costs about $4,000. And it is a wonderful machine and it's worth every penny. But it may not be for you. There are other machines that are half the price of the bullet that can do what you need. The bullet has a lot of things about it that really work for my roasting environment in my kitchen. I don't have a ton of space. The bullet is fairly compact for what it can do. So let's bring it all back here. Know your production limits. If you're on a Gene Cafe, think very carefully about how much time you're gonna have to put into roasting to provide a specific amount of bags. Market managers aren't gonna like it very much if you show up to a market that lasts 4 hours and you keep selling out within your first hour. Yeah, you have what appears to be high demand, but you actually have low supply. So you have to provide a comfortable amount of product to jive with that market. There's gonna be a lot of people who might show up and you're gone already because you've only brought 5 or 10 bags and you sold them all. You don't want that to happen. So you need to be very cognizant of your limitations, of the time you have available to you during the week, any given week. During my busiest weeks, I could be roasting 5 or 10 bags every day to prepare for my Thursday market. On my slowest weeks, I can just do 1 day of roasting and then the rest of the week can be devoted to other things. Choosing the right machine is an important step in this process. I'm not sponsored by aillio. I'm not sponsored by Gene Cafe. I'm not sponsored by anyone when I'm talking about all this. This is just my experience. Now, there's other things you're gonna need. Preparing for a farmer's market involves a lot of material gathering. Certain things like you're gonna need a tent. I chose a 5-foot tent for my 5-foot space. I picked the color brown because coffee, and no one else had a brown tent that I knew of, and I was correct. So I kind of stand out a little bit. And these tents are really easy to use. I'll try to put a link to as much as I talk about here as possible that I can find for you guys. You find it in the description below. But I bought my tent on Amazon and I bought lots of other little things. You're gonna need to make small investments and on top of big investments to start this journey. My buddy who actually designed my logo here also lent me a few things like the 2 5-foot tables that I use. So I in my 5-foot space, I actually set 1 5-foot table horizontally to showcase my product, and then 1 5-foot table stretches back in an L shape so that I can shift to the side and brew coffee. And why do I brew coffee at a farmer's market? For samples. There's other vendors who I have met at farmers markets in the past who brew coffee at home and then they put it in a thermos and then bring it to a farmer's market, and that's fine. But for me, I don't like to allow my coffee to sit in a thermos for too long because the taste obviously can alter a little bit as time goes on. You don't want your coffee to sit for too long and then try to tell somebody this is what it should taste like and then it's been sitting in a thermos for 3 hours. You don't want that. So I bring a Chemex and I bring my V60. But people really love to see the Chemex in action. If you can nail a pour over, especially while you're talking to customers, if you can just if it's second nature to you to do a pour over while talking to people, I really recommend you do it. You have the facilities to make coffee there. You should just do it. And I will tell you that serving samples of my coffee has probably sold me half of my coffee throughout my entire time doing farmers market. Free samples, people love free stuff in general. And anybody who likes coffee in the slightest, they're probably gonna take a free sample. Now, if you've truly got a good product, if you're a half decent roaster and you're starting off with really good quality coffee beans, you're gonna have a good product to show people. Free samples of specialty coffee are going to give you a huge increase in odds in selling that coffee. There's usually a fee involved, a season fee, if you want to drop in for a day. I know my town has a day rate where you don't want to commit to an entire summer and part of your fall to being at this farmer's market every Thursday, which is mine here in Charlevoix. They have a day rate, which is like, it's like $50 a day or something like that. But the seasonal fee was like $150, maybe a little bit less. And that grants you access to the space every single Thursday, every week. And it was from the end of May, and we just finished up here. It's now November. Now, obviously that's a much better value if you know you can make it every single week. But if you don't know how often you can make it, check with your city and you may be able to access some day rates instead of seasonal rates. And this was for a 5-foot space. Some other markets may not have spaces that are allocated for only 5 feet, because that's a particularly small booth. Most other vendors are taking up 10, maybe 20-foot spaces, and those are going to cost different. Now, for me as a coffee vendor, my product doesn't take up a lot of space. I'm very efficient with the way I set up, with the way I lay everything out, and I didn't need a 10-foot space. I made that decision for myself. However, if I did have a 10-foot space, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt. I'm sure I could use it just as well, but I like my 5-foot space. I can get in and out very quickly, and we'll talk about setting up and all that stuff in a little bit. But I will say, bring the Chemex, brew the coffee, and let them try it. That's a huge deal, and that sells a lot of coffee for me. Okay, so we've gone over networking, we've gone over brand identity, and we've gone over some of the things you need to get started. Roaster, actually having items at a booth. You need a cash register, you need some petty cash to start out with, so you can make change for people. I usually bring about $100 between like 120, some 10s, 5s, and 1s. You need a card reader. And I mean it, you need one, because there's people who come to the farmer's market who remember to bring cash, and they're wonderful. And then there are tourists who don't really participate in farmers markets on a regular basis, and they're just there. They're not really aware that that's like etiquette or that that's something you should do, because you may or may not realize anyone who has a card reader to process your credit card pays a processing fee. And that's minimal, but it's something that the locals, I think, really think about and other people don't. So if you can be mindful as a patron, bring cash if you can. As a vendor, bring a card reader, because not everyone thinks about that, so you can process cards. Venmo also has been infrequent, but occasionally people ask if I have Venmo because that's what they have. That's fine. I have a Venmo account set up. It's easy to link to your bank. You get the money, you can have it instantly, basically. But again, there's processing fees on top of that. If anybody says, I have cash or this, which one would you prefer? Take the cash. You're not paying processing fees. That said, I have a PayPal card reader. So anybody who pays me with a credit card, I run their card and it goes into my PayPal business account. What's nice about that is I have a PayPal credit line that I actually use to spend on business expenses for various things. Like when I buy my green coffee, actually to roast, I use my credit line, my PayPal credit line. And so that when I'm selling coffee at a farmer's market and I run a card, it goes to my PayPal account balance. And then after every farmer's market, I have a balance on my PayPal and I use that to pay on the credit line. That can be really helpful. So credit card reader, have cash register, having sample cups. I use 3-ounce sample cups, and they're just little white paper cups. You can get bundles of them for, $15, like a couple hundred of them for pennies, basically. That's important to have. If you plan on brewing coffee, you recommend it. I just recently started selling 8-ounce cups of coffee. I have, for that reason, this air pot. This guy here comes in handy. It's a 3-liter air pot. And so what I'll do is 2 big brews in it right away in the morning. My farmer's market that goes through the winter starts at 9 a.m. So about 8:45, my table's all set up. I take the V60 out and I set it right here and I brew into it. I do all my weights and measurements on a scale first, and then when I'm ready to bloom and start brewing, I put the V60 right on top of the air pot and I brew right into the air pot. I'll do two 45-gram brews in it and it fills about half the air pot, and you don't want to fill it all up because you don't want your coffee to sit for too long. But that'll provide me 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee, something like that, to start the morning off. And I might only sell 3 or 4 or 5 cups of coffee throughout the day, but at least I'm prepared right away in the morning, because that's usually when people want coffee, is in the earlier parts of the day. So the air pot, brewing coffee, having access to electricity is important. If you want to brew that coffee, I have an electric kettle that I use only for farmers markets because it gets beat up, so it's a cheaper one, but it gets the job done. Extension cords. For my summer market in Charlevoix here, I need about 100 feet of extension cord to provide power to my kettle. I actually have 3 different extension cords because I had to move around a couple of times throughout the summer. So buy enough extension cord for what you might possibly need to power your kettle if you plan to brew coffee. On top of that, there's lots of other things, little things you are just not going to think about. You know, paper towels, because you might spill. A trash can, because people might want somewhere to put your sample cup. Don't incentivize them to walk away from your booth. Provide a spot for them to put their trash, so they stick around. Little things like that. You just don't think about them right away, and honestly, I didn't either. A lot of these things came along week after week after week. Oh, I should have this. Oh, I should have this. Oh, I should have this. So I've built on weeks of and months of learning the needs. So initial investments, you've got season fees that might be a couple $100. You've got your roasters, and you've got bags. Cost of doing business is important to understand in the finance part of this, but we'll step into that in just a little bit. Understanding your process, your weekly process. It's just about every other week now that I have to order more coffee. And so once or twice a week, I'm receiving coffee, and having organization in place for that is pretty important. So I have things like these food grade bins where certain coffees that I have often can go into. If I don't want to have the bags of the like cotton or burlap bags sitting around, sometimes I don't, and I have a space for like half a dozen of these bins sitting on a shelf along my wall in my kitchen. And so I have a place where some of that coffee can reside in clear view, easy for me to get access to. Other things, ventilation for your roaster. You really should have proper ventilation if you're gonna use something like the Aillio Bullet. If you're gonna use the Gene Cafe, you need a ventilation exhaust tube, and then you need to purchase a fan unit that can pull the heat and smoke out from your machine, out of your house. So you need to be prepared with proper ventilation. In fact, I don't even have proper ventilation. I have a nice fan unit that costs me $100, but I should be using something that creates a proper vacuum. The fan that I use is this AC Infinity Raxial Series AC RX S4. I had seen some people online recommending it. Turns out it's not the best. It gets the job done, but it actually, it's not great. I have this little adapter that sits on top of the exhaust port. It's 3D printed, and it kind of melted the adapter. So I'm thinking I might need to find a different adapter solution, because the exhaust tube doesn't fit flush against the bullet. It actually needs to sit tight against an adapter that fits to both things. That adapter melted because it was made of some plastic from a 3D printer, and that only cost me like $15, which is why I got it. Maybe there's another solution out there that I need to look at. Otherwise, it still works. It's just kind of loose now. Okay, other things you might need to think of in preparation. You've got your bags, you've got cups, you've got paper towels, the AirPods, you've got... if you're going to serve cups of coffee, you're gonna want sugar and you're gonna want cream. I use the little half and half cups. You can buy like 24 of them for like $3 or $4 at a grocery store. And then I use Sweet and Low and just like regular normal sugar packets as well, because I have half of the people who want sugar in their coffee want Sweet and Low and the other half want real sugar. So you gotta kind of have both. These are the things that you discover week to week to week. Make sure you have something to stir the coffee with. Make sure you're not using styrofoam cups, or the paper cups you're using aren't too thin, because your coffee should be hot. And super hot coffee in a styrofoam cup can melt it a little bit and alter the taste, and you definitely don't want that. So if you can avoid using styrofoam cups, I know they're like the cheapest, please try to avoid it if you can. Get a nice kind of double insulated paper cup if you can find it. There are plenty of great options rated for hot coffee. You should be using that. All right, so a few more things you might want to have in preparation for your farmers markets. A sign. Now, I don't have a sign with my logo on it, but I have this vinyl sign that I bought that hangs down from the top of my booth, and it just says fresh roasted coffee, whole bean, and I think it says samples on it, something like that. Basically, coffee. And people need to know from a distance what you have, because you can't count on them all being super close and reading everything on your bag. Some of them are going to be walking from 10, 20, 30, 40 feet away, depending on your layout. And they may not know what you have, and they may not really have the energy or want to put the effort into coming to see what you have. So some of them really appreciate having coffee on this big banner that they can see, oh, they have coffee, I should go over there and see what kind of coffee. So a sign is really helpful. These are other design elements you're gonna have to think of way ahead of time, especially if you need to hire someone out to design it, because then you need to hire someone to print it. And you might be able to find someone who does both of those things. I recommend checking out local print houses in your area, because they may have in-house designers who can help you with both of those tasks. Business cards. I use a card that is, here, let me show you. I use these business cards I got made up online. Very easy to find a place that'll print you some business cards. I did design them myself on Adobe InDesign. And what they are QR codes, basically, that have information. And that's what people want, really, is information. Now, the information that's contained in these QR codes are links to my website. On one side, if they scanned this link, it takes them to a place on my website that I wrote a big old blog post with lots of information about each of the coffees that remain constant on my table at every market. So the Haiti, the Guatemala, the Bolivia, the Ethiopia, and the Mexico, those can be found regularly. And so I wanted a place where people can find more information about those coffees. It's got my contact information, it's got my social medias, and on the other side, I provided something else that was helpful too. On the other side, you might see is an area for the basics to brewing. There we go. So I provided a place for information about the basics to brewing. Why would a roaster want to do that? Well, we want our customers to be having our coffee in the best way possible. And if all they need is just a little education, and they're willing to click a link and go see it and read and learn, then they're going to have better coffee. And why not provide that education if it's as easy as scanning on their phone for them, right? It's not just a business card. What I have here is actual helpful information. When they have the product, they have this too. They can make coffee better at home. And that's what this whole channel is about. I want people making coffee better at home. So we've gone over preparing for a farmer's market, networking, brand identity, getting your supplies in order, knowing your limitations and your production capabilities. And we are now talking about actually being at a farmer's market, what it's like to do the thing. I think they're wonderful. Our farmer's markets that I do here in Charlevoix in the summer and in the fall, and through the winter in Boyne City, it's about 15-20 minutes away from me. They're awesome small town community feels. You really get to know all the customers, you get to know your neighbors, and you get to know people who are visiting your town. You get to, just the people aspect of it is really great. If you have just a positive mindset and you're proud of what you make and what you sell, people are going to pick up on that pretty quickly. So in combination with good branding, good information, being a good salesperson, and being positive and a good communicator. These things are all necessary to actually end up making sales. It's early mornings, it's a lot of work, but the result is being part of something really special. It's about 5:30 in the morning. I wake up. I may or may not make myself some coffee because I know I'm gonna have plenty of it at the farmer's market. But if I was smart, I loaded my car up the night before. If I wasn't, I still have a couple bins left to put in my car. Got dressed, I'm ready to go. I try to have a snack or bring a snack with me, because from about 6 o'clock on, you are traveling to and setting up for your farmer's market. Depends on what time yours starts. Mine in the summer starts at 8, so I like to be there early because the coffee guy should be there early, right? Drive down, arrive around 6:30, 6:45, and start setting up. That involves parking in a place that is about 20, maybe 30 yards from where I'm actually going to be carrying all of my things to my spot. A lot of my bins tend to weigh 30, 40, or 50 pounds, so you have to take that into consideration. So you're carrying all your items to your spot. You have to be aware of how long that takes, because 4 or 5 bins, 50 pounds each, plus your tables, plus sandbags to hold your tents down when it's windy, that's important too. It can take about 20 minutes to get all of those items out of your car. And for me, I also have to move my car away from that parking spot, because those then are used for people during the market to just be parking downtown. So I've parked my car away from everything. Now I walk back, and it's about maybe 7:30 now. 7:15, maybe 7:30. Now I'm setting up my booth. And I like to be set up really like no later than 7:30, 7:45. So I'm ready to sell coffee earlier than anybody else is ready to sell anything, because I would like to be somebody the vendors can come to if they need some coffee in the morning. Obviously, no one asked me to do that. That's just, I think, good work ethic. Be ready early. So by 8 o'clock, I am already ready to go. I may have already made a couple of sales. A lot of early birds show up a little before 8. A lot of the vendors like to buy coffee a little early. So I'd like to be absolutely already going by 8 o'clock. That's my market time start in the summer. At that point, it's just go, go, go. I'm brewing coffee so that by about 8:30, I have my air pot full of coffee. I'm handing out samples, and I'm just having conversations all day long. People are stopping, asking questions. I'm seeing people week over week. I'm seeing new people every week. I might sell 45 bags of coffee. Now, if those were all $10 bags, I'd be selling $450 worth of coffee. And that is an amazing day. That's a really, really great day for me. Or I might sell 10 bags of coffee. Having a commodity item at the $10 mark is really nice for the market, because there's a lot of people who bring crafts who charge $50 or $100 for certain handmade items, and they're well worth that price. But there's certain people who are only bringing $10, $20, maybe $30 to the market, and they're looking for lower cost items. Eventually you'll get people who want your coffee. They want your item, and they come back and they're prepared to pay. They know you're gonna be there. You're gonna build an audience. It's all about the people and being a salesperson. I have a little bit of experience in food service. I worked at a sub shop in Marquette called Togo's for a little while I was at school at NMU. Other than that, I didn't really have any sales, retail, or food service experience. And I feel like I already went into that job just knowing how to communicate and behave like a good human. That's all it really takes. Be genuine, be authentic, be kind, be helpful. If you can nail those things, you're in a good spot. If you're informative about what you're selling, and you're kind and you're authentic, people are gonna wanna buy it. They're gonna wanna try it. They may not like it as much as you hope they would, and they may not buy from you again, but you can make sales based on that alone. Now, if you provide a great product and they like specialty coffee, they're gonna come back. They're gonna come back over and over and over again, especially if you're the only one at that market with that product. Whole bean coffee versus supplying ground coffee. I had this thought that a lot more people would be seeking out and buying already ground coffee, when in fact, a lot of my customers want whole bean coffee. And that is it's heartwarming. It gives me confidence that there is a market for serious specialty coffee buyers. Now, I'm not saying this is representative of every farmer's market you'll go to. So when I break it down week to week to week, it seems to me that it's about a 50-50 split. Half of the coffee I sell is whole bean farm and half of the coffee I sell is ground. It's not that any one person is buying one or the other every other week. It's those with a grinder will buy whole bean only. Those without a grinder only buy ground coffee. And it's really difficult to provide enough information and motivation for people to want to buy a grinder to then grind their own coffee. I'm working on that. I have had great conversations with people to let them know the benefits of grinding their own coffee. I put out that video of the benefits of grinding your own coffee, where to start looking for coffee grinders, how much you should spend. That's all information that's good and well, but it has to be well received. People want to have that conversation, and not everybody does. There's a lot of people who are very content with buying ground coffee, and if they're drinking it within the week or two they're buying it, there's nothing wrong with that. I grind my coffee bags. I'll dump a whole bag into my Breville Smart Grinder Pro. It's absolutely not the way to go if you're trying to provide ground coffee on a commercial scale. You need a commercial grinder. So you're on site, you've got whole bean options, you've got ground options if you want to provide it. I recommend you do. You don't want to lose a sale just because you didn't have a ground option, but I always am a proponent of providing education. As roasters, we need to be able to provide as much education as we possibly can so that we can maintain good relationships, maintain regular sales, and just have great relationships within your community. There's nothing wrong with being someone to go to for information about the thing you're specializing in, which is high quality specialty coffee. Okay, here's another important factor when you're talking about trying to make a business out of this coffee passion, right? The cost of the coffee itself. It's always changing, and you need to be prepared for extreme changes or changes over a certain amount of time that may require you to make adjustments to your prices, to the quantity you're buying. So let's dig into, for example, the price of my Haiti coffee. This bag of coffee that I sell costs customers $10. A half pound, so 8 ounces for $10 is right in line with a good bag of specialty coffee. You might find 12-ounce bags for $15, $16. I've seen 12-ounce bags for $19 around me here locally. I know you can get them for even much higher prices than that, depending on the varietals, depending on the rarity, the volume coming out of the farm. The prices can change hugely. So you have to be extremely careful about exactly what you offer. Look at the price trends for that green coffee and try to get an understanding of, okay, has it been on the rise? Is it probably going to continue to rise? Has it gone up and down, or has it stayed flat for a long time? Try to get a read on its reliability with regards to its cost. This Haiti coffee has done nothing but go up a little bit, like every other month, and I have to always keep an eye on it, because if it goes up too high, I need to put it in my $15 price bracket. It's already very, very close to that threshold of almost not making me like any money. So let's talk about the finances. Making money. Starting a business, priority number one should be making money, because if you're not making money, you're not going to be a business for very long. With that said, I have not made a profit this year because I made certain initial investments, and ongoing costs have stretched out my return on investment period. That's something to consider. If you're hoping to buy a few things to get started, and then by the end of the summer you've profited thousands of dollars over your investments, it may not work that way. So you have to be very careful and calculated and understand if you can make the time commitments. You'll get it eventually. You have to be particularly watchful. Let's talk about the price of my bags, how I price it, and the costs involved. In recurring costs, $1 in the bag. You have to buy those at volume, obviously. So I buy typically anywhere between 50 bags at a time if I know I'm going through a slow period, or I'll buy 200, maybe 500 at a time. I know at one point in the summer I bought a 500 bag lot, and I went through that over the course of a couple of months, but now it's winter time, so I'm buying 100, 200, maybe 50 bags at a time, depending on how quickly I go through some over a couple of weeks' time. And so if you buy in volume, you get discounts usually on your overall price. So I bought 200 bags a couple of weeks ago, and I believe I paid something like 29 cents a bag, or maybe 27 cents per bag. And if you buy lower quantities from those same people, you're going to see an increase in per bag cost because they need to maintain their margin. So that's cost of materials involved in the finished product. Then there's the cost of the beans, the coffee beans themselves. The coffee beans are going to fluctuate in price all the time. You need to monitor it. So I'm going to actually pull up my spreadsheet here that has my record of purchasing and tell you how this Haiti coffee has moved in price. For me to buy green, and as part of organization and record keeping, I keep all of my income and expenses recorded on a couple different Excel sheets. I just do it all myself. I manually enter everything. If you have a POS system that logs inventory, logs your sales, awesome, use it. I don't have experience with those. I just log everything myself manually. It works for me. So everything in my 2022 expense tab is all here. I have non-recurring expenses in one column. I have recurring expenses in another column. I have recurring expenses in the form of green beans. So I have different types of expenses organized in different ways so that I can monitor how I'm perhaps spending money in certain ways. Like, oh, I've spent too much in non-recurring expenses. I need to cut that back so that I don't let that get out of control. Or, oh, I've spent this much in coffee this month. Maybe I can ride it out for a couple more weeks so that I'm not overspending on green coffee, because you don't want green coffee to sit for too long either. It's got a good shelf life, but there's no reason for green coffee to sit for 6 months. You don't need to buy that much at one time. That varies from market to market. You got to make that decision for yourself. So let's look at Haiti here. If I look at 2022 expenses, so $9.05 a pound. And then earlier in the same month, $9.05 per pound for 10 pounds as well. Let's see, a $9.05 per pound for 10 pounds. And that stayed true for June. That stayed true for May. But in April, I paid $8.75 per pound for 10 pounds. And that is true for February, and that is true for January as well. Now, if I look on my importer's website, let's check out how much it costs. For 10 pounds of the same coffee, I can get it for $9.55 a pound. So we're talking almost $1 more per pound than the beginning of this year for the same amount of coffee for 10 pounds. That you have to take that into consideration. $1 difference doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about large quantities and multiple purchases, sometimes multiple times a month, it'll add up. You got to consider that when you're talking about profiting on a single bag of coffee. So that means, let's say I just paid $9.55 for a pound of this coffee. Let's divide that by 2. Half of $9.55 is about $4.78. What that means is $4.78 is in green coffee in cost alone in this bag of coffee. My bag only costs $10. So we're talking about in coffee, $4.78. In materials costs another $1 at least, $5.78. And then what a lot of people don't really consider is their time. Do you think making this bag of coffee was worth about $3 of my time? Because that's what's left over. That's where volume and making other choices for different kinds of coffee with different prices becomes important. And so that's why I do my limited bags. Let me get one of those. Okay, so I have these kind of universal labels that I designed that allow me to write in certain details so that I can provide coffees of all kinds of varieties, and I'm not locked into just this or my Guatemala or my other Ethiopia. I have 4 or 5 regular rotation coffees. This is not one of them. What I do here is I buy 3 pounds, maybe 5 pounds, whereas I would normally buy 10, 25, or 50 pounds of these types of coffees. I can get better rates at those kinds of volumes for these coffees. My regulars have new options every once in a while. A couple of times a month, they'll see something new, and they might want to try that because I've tried everything else. That also allows me a higher profit margin because I charge $15 for these bags. That allows me to actually make a viable business out of this because this Cambada actually costs less than this Haiti. Let's take a look. Yeah, well, turns out this Cambada is out of stock because they just ran a sale. Normally, this Cambada is $8 a pound. That's already cheaper than the $9.55 this is currently. So for $8 a pound, cut that in half, you're talking about $4 instead of the $4.78 per bag. But on top of that, I bought 5 pounds of Cambada on its last sale, and now it's out of stock, at $5.85 a pound. Cut that in half, and you're talking about a much higher profit margin, especially when I charge $15 per bag for these bags. Now, I'm not charging higher because I'm just wanting more money. Like I said, it does take a little more effort. I have to take more time writing these out. I have to take more time developing profiles for these new coffees every month. And there's more cost involved in my time, but I make up for that with a higher price tier. I'm often spending about $150, anywhere between $150 to $300 or $400 on green coffee beans so that I have my next month or two stocked up. You may want to buy much less than that, and you may want to buy much more than that, depending on your market, the traffic of your farmer's market. These are the things you're going to want to understand as you make orders and adjust along the way. Okay, so we have talked about preparing for a farmer's market. We have talked about being at a farmer's market. Let's talk about analyzing the results of being at a farmer's market, the after, the adjustments that might need to be made. I can tell you that when I started back in May of 2022, I felt as though I might sell 5 or 10 bags of coffee, and that was it. I had no idea that there was a lot of people that were familiar with specialty and that there was a demand for it in the way that there was. And so after my first market, I want to say I brought 20 or 25 bags of coffee, and I feel like I sold somewhere between 15 and 20 bags. And that kind of blew my mind at the time. I was like, wow, I kind of sold double the expectation. And this was end of May. It's not hot in May in Michigan, I'll tell you that. So the tourists aren't really up yet. And the tourists really try to follow the weather. And there are many more people who come up for the summer than the winter and the fall. And so selling 15 bags of coffee was probably mostly to locals at the time, which is great. So I had to make an adjustment, right? And I was like, okay, it's gonna be warmer next week. There might be more people. And so I believe I brought 30 bags the next time. And I believe I sold close to 30 bags. I probably sold 20 to 25. And so as the weeks went on, the hotter it got, the more bags I sold, the more people were out and enjoying the day. These things are what you need to be aware of, you need to prepare for. And after you've done the markets and you're like, okay, I sold 30 bags of coffee today. What am I gonna bring next week? Let's try to bring 35. Let's try to bring 40. Let's try to bring 45. And eventually I sold 45 bags at one of my markets. And I was like, I don't know if I can bring 50 bags to the next one. Well, I did. I ended up bringing, I think at most on any market, 70 bags of coffee. To produce 70 bags, let's do the math on that. 70 bags divided by 3 is 23 times 15 minutes. 350 minutes divided by 60, that is 5.8 hours of roasting, but 6 hours accumulated to roast 70 bags of my coffee. Now you might be doing 12-ounce bags, but to provide 70 8-ounce bags took me 6 hours of roasting on the bullet. That's on average. That's for a 15-minute roast. I can get some roast done in 10 minutes and some done in 16 or 17. But on average, that's the kind of time commitment you've got to think of. So adjusting after the fact, being aware of how much you sold, what people are buying. Do you feel like there's more traffic coming along in the weeks to come? Make those adjustments. It's always good to make adjustments on the fly. Let's say you're doing the 1 to 17 ratio for Chemex and you brewed 45 grams. And what often happens to me is people tell me, oh, this coffee's so strong. I like it, but it's so strong. And what I've always seemed to think is that people who are brewing coffee in like a drip machine, like a cheap coffee maker, they tend to brew really weak coffee. And it's nobody's fault, it's just the way things have always been for a lot of homes, right? And so I realized like the proper way to brew coffee in a Chemex or a V60 or whatever seems very strong to a lot of people. And so I'll make it that way. And if I feel like a lot of people throughout the day keep telling me it's strong, make an adjustment. Maybe make it just a little bit weaker, maybe a 1:18, 1:19, maybe a 1:20 ratio. And you might be hitting the mark for a lot of your customers. Not everyone's going to be receptive to the idea of changing their brew method and their ratios because you have some kind of coffee they've never had before. They're not going to change their habits, right? Not without a good incentive to do so. All right, so making adjustments, super important, especially if you're doing more than one market. In the middle of the summer, from May until the end of August, I only had one market. That was my one Charlevoix market. That's a challenge on its own to kind of stay on top of every week. And then I was approached in September by the market manager from Boyne City, who asked me, hey, would you like to come sell coffee at my market too? They didn't have a coffee person who also provided cups of coffee and coffee samples. So I said, yes, I would like to. Getting more coffee out into my surrounding communities is always a good idea in my mind. So I took that challenge, and from September until now, I had balanced 2 different markets. So managing your time, your expectations, and making proper adjustments every single week is really important. Getting a gauge on what people want, having conversations about certain coffees that people are looking for, ordering certain things like a lot of people told me to get a Costa Rica Terrazzo. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And it was kind of insight for me to go, okay, there's a lot of people who are familiar with Costa Rica. So I got some Costa Rica, and that was receptive. People were really like, oh, you've got Costa Rica, I want the Costa Rica. So getting a beat on what people are looking for, if they're into specialty, do you have this, do you have that? No, but I'll look for it and I'll try to get it. Manage that as well. You've got a certain product line, that's great. Try to keep that constant, but in terms of what you can try once in a while, look for what people are asking for. Ask what they're looking for. Hey, have you heard of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee? What do you think? Should I try and get some? Would you buy that? Hey, I would love to try some Ethiopia Sidamo. Do you think you could get some? Yeah, I'll look when I make my order next week. So things like that. Have those conversations and you'll get those people back. It doesn't mean you need to make them constant staples in your lineup, but if you can be flexible like that, it will help you. Another thing that I do that is really key to developing really strong relationships with customers and friends and family, have tastings. Whether that's at a public location that you can kind of rent out or you can just use for a little while. If you can brew coffee at a location and gather 4, 5, 6 people around a table and try 4, 5, 6 different coffees, you're gonna be able to build really strong bonds with people over coffee, and it's your coffee, right? Let's say you have a coffee that hasn't made it to market yet. You just bought this coffee and you need to test it. It's not a great idea for you to be the only one trying this coffee because maybe your senses are different from a lot of other people's senses, right? And so it's a good idea to get feedback from your community so that you provide what your community wants. You can just do V60 brews all around, and as long as it's a constant brew from one to the next, and they're gonna get a clear idea of what that coffee tastes like and how it's different from the last one and how that's different from the last one before that. Do these coffee tastings and you're gonna find that people are really gonna enjoy them. They're going to be more than willing to provide feedback. You don't have to charge for them because what you get back from that is really valuable. But eventually, once you get a large following and people really, really want to be engaged, maybe you can charge and make a little money on the side as part of ticketed private tastings. But I think it's a great idea to say, hey, you've been buying coffee from me all summer. I would really love if you had some time on Sunday to come out to my place and try some coffee with me and a couple other people who have been regulars here at the market. 9 times out of 10, they're more than willing to at least consider the idea. And then if they have the time, a lot of them really want to do it. All right, I'm sure there's other things that I'm not thinking of, but I have covered more than just the basics, I believe. I know this is a long video. I know it's packed full of information, and I hope that I've laid it out in such a way that you can learn from it in some digestible fashion. Whether that means you have to come back and watch different parts of it at certain times to get a grasp on different things I'm talking about when it's relevant to you. I hope you can at least save this video, put it in a playlist or something, come back to it to watch specific portions. That's fine with me. I just want to put this information out there because I know if I found this back in March or April of this year before I was doing the farmers markets, I would have watched it in its entirety to get this perspective, to understand what one person roasting at home on a home machine can provide if they have the will, the time, and the persistence to produce something for their community. If that's you, good luck to you. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of work, but I think it's entirely worthwhile. I just feel like I'm part of people's lives now in a more meaningful way. I wish that for each and every one of you who want to pursue making coffee part of business in your life, because passion needs to be involved. If you're not feeling passionate about roasting coffee and brewing coffee and sharing coffee with the ones you love and your neighbors and your community, then maybe it's not for you. But we're here now talking about how to make this into a viable business, how to get your foot in the door with business. I hope this was helpful. You guys are just the best if you've stuck around this long. All I want is for everybody to have better coffee, right? We're all having a better time. We're all enjoying life a little bit more. I hope you take this information and make something good out of it. Good luck to you. If you've got more to add to the conversation, please put it down below. If you've participated in markets, if you haven't yet, but you've got questions, put them down below. Me or other people might be able to answer some questions for you. If I didn't cover a topic you were hoping to hear about, maybe I'll make a part 2 to this video. Put those below. Other than that, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. I've got some really cool things coming. I am going to New Orleans in about a week's time. I'm going to start vlogging that, and it's going to be episodic, I think. I'm going to take lots of video, lots of pictures. It's going to be part of my Coffee Anywhere series, I believe. And just hitting that with a couple different angles. So there's new stuff coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.